Thank you for joining us today, Yash. So we're joined by Yash Patodia, Senior Managing Director and Equity Portfolio Manager of our Asia Technology Approach. I'm Brian Young, an Investment Specialist with Wellington Management. Yash, in your opinion, why is today such an exciting time for technology?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me here. I think we're at a fascinating time in technology. If I think of the tech landscape, there are many different themes to it, right? Which have been long-term mega trends, such as automation, the electrification of cars, cloud computing, and all of these trends are being accelerated by AI today. So when I think about the long-term opportunity within technology, I can't think of a way where we will be less reliant on technology in the future. Like, I'm sure all of us are going to be using tech a lot more in the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm confident that different industries are going to use a lot more tech. Whether you are a manufacturing company, whether you are an automotive company, you could be a financial services firm. If you don't invest in tech, if you're not tech first, it's likely that you're not going to survive. So I think the proliferation of AI has only accelerated that trend. And that's what makes this a really exciting time within technology. Maybe one example I can give in terms of appreciating the acceleration that we're seeing in tech, if you think of the time that it has taken different tech cycles to hit 100 million users, PCs took about 15 years to hit 100 million users. The internet took about 7 to 8 years. Smartphones took 4 to 5 years. And then you think about applications. Instagram took 2.5 years to reach 100 million users. TikTok took 9 months. And ChatGPT, which we're all using now, took 2 months to reach 100 million users. That just shows you the intensity or the proliferation of technology and how quickly that has been accelerating. And I think that's a trend that's only going to continue.
Good answer. Next question, but building on from that is, I think you mentioned before that oftentimes technology, and I'm paraphrasing a quote from Bill Gates, is often overestimated in the near term, but underestimated over the long term. How do you feel AI fits into that today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has been true of previous tech cycles, right? Like, no one could have imagined that there will be a laptop or a PC in everyone's desk, or that everyone's going to have access to the internet. In fact, you look at a lot of the business models that have been created today, they have been on top of new technologies. So take smartphones, for example. Developing the smartphone was only stage one, but it's really the ecosystem of applications that came around it that made it special, right? Things such as Grab, Uber, Instagram, TikTok, they would not have existed as companies if we didn't have smartphones. So if I think about AI, we're at a similar stage. We're still at the very beginnings of AI. We're yet to see the whole application ecosystem come out of it. So if I zoom out, the way I think about how tech cycles happen in very simple terms is you have 3 phases or 3 buckets. You have the enablers, you have the platform, and then you have the applications. So if you think about the iPhone example or the smartphone example, the enablers were the companies that were creating the processors that go into it, the memory, the connectivity, the LCD panels that you swipe over. All of those were the components that actually allow you to build something like a smartphone. The platform then is something like iOS or Android that sits on top of it. And the third phase is the application phase. So if you look at the value creation cycle for each tech cycle, it starts with the enablers, and then you have the platforms, and the largest amount of value is created on the application area. And that's what we saw most recently on the smartphone side. If I think about where we are in AI, we are very much in the phase of developing the infrastructure. We are currently investing in GPUs and training capacity, getting the models together. And that's where the supply chain comes in, because the supply chain for all of this semiconductors and the equipment that goes there, all of that rests in Asia, and that's really benefiting from it, and we expect that to continue to benefit. Then you will have platforms. Now in platforms, it's a little early to tell which platform will be the winner. Back in the day for smartphones, there was BlackBerry, there was Microsoft, there was Nokia, those are not found today. So we could see something similar. While we have leaders today in OpenAI, in Google, we don't know who the leaders are going to be in the future. What we do know is that they're investing aggressively, which is where the enablers benefit. And then finally, the third phase will be applications. And we are, again, very, very early days here. But that is the ecosystem that's going to see a lot of value creation. We probably don't even know what the next big thing will be. There are probably a couple of people in a garage who are working on something today that's going to make the next big thing that you and I perhaps can't even imagine. And I think that's where the quote comes from, because we are limited by our ability to imagine, and what can be created with where AI is going perhaps hasn't been imagined yet. So I'm really excited about that, and I think there's going to be a massive shift in how everyone works, in how we consume content, in what we do in our free time, because of AI.
So there are many strong structural trends in the tech sector: digitization, automation, and more compute that is going to impact our lives globally. I think, as you said, artificial intelligence is only an accelerant to that. How does Asia fit into this picture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think Asia can sometimes get ignored in sort of the headlines where we just hear about companies in the US. But what's important is to remember Asia's role as the picks and shovels provider for all the infrastructure, all the development in tech that's currently happening. I'll give you an example. So you take semiconductors, for example. You look at a company such as the leading GPU companies in the US, the supply chain that actually helps them, everything from getting the wafers to the manufacturing process to packaging to testing, all of that is in Asia. And a lot of the companies that are doing this are uniquely qualified to do it. What I mean by that is there are either two companies doing it in the world, or sometimes there's just one company. For example, there's a test equipment provider that can actually look for defects that are as small as the hair of the, as small as the DNA of humans, 1 or 2 nanometers. And this is the only company in the world that can do it, that can create such equipment. So I think that there is massive opportunity just in these picks and shovels providers, because to some extent, we don't know who the winners of the future are going to be. Today, there are 1 or 2 companies that are leading, but there are other companies who are trying to enter that same battle. So if you look at some of the larger tech companies in the US, they're all trying to create custom chips. But the supply chain that all of these companies use is going to be the same. So the supply chain benefits regardless of whether the winner is the company that's leading today, or whether the winner is someone else that's a new company or an existing company that's investing aggressively here. So I think what makes Asia interesting, if I were to break it down to 3 things, one would be that they're the heart of the semiconductor supply chain. The second is that Asia is where we're seeing growth. It is one of the fastest growing regions, one of the fastest growing middle class, which is the consumption class. And third is Asia is still early in the journey to digitization. What I mean by that is consumers as well as enterprises are still early in adopting digital tools, digital services in order to make their lives better or increase the productivity of their businesses. So I think all of those 3 things together, and the fact that Asia appears to us under the radar, under-researched, because a lot of the companies here are small and mid-caps where you really have to roll up your sleeves and go visit them. Asia actually has more companies in technology than the US and Europe do, which is something that people don't appreciate. So there really is a lot of options here. There's some really leading companies, but we think there's an opportunity in actually finding those, identifying those, and growing with the earnings that these companies are growing.
Can we maybe focus a little bit on just that soundbite that maybe Asia is also exciting because there are more companies here? So we just get one more soundbite of like Asia is exciting because of the number of companies here, and maybe the expertise that goes into the semiconductor supply chain. So i.e. that they're not just low margin manufacturers without tech expertise. Like they actually have a lot of value that they can add to their customers.
Right, sure. So I'll give a couple of examples of what makes some of these companies in Asia very strong in terms of what they do. If you think about the semiconductor supply chain, the reason why it came to existence the way it has today is because back in the day, the manufacturing process was outsourced to Asia. Semiconductor manufacturing was, one of the management teams mentioned that it is the pinnacle of human achievement. It is so complex that it is very, very difficult to replicate this. So when I think about some of the companies in Asia, for example, you take a company that is developing equipment, semiconductor equipment for grinding and cutting wafers. Now that has to be done with a level of precision which is incredibly difficult to do. So you have to cut the wafers a certain way. You have to slice them in a certain way with a very precise amount of thickness so that you can then actually use it in the chipsets that you're making it for. There's only one company that does that. And the amount of know-how that goes into it, the amount of research and development that goes into it means that it is very difficult to replicate. And it's not just a function of the amount of capital you put into it. It actually is a lot of know-how that you develop over the years. So that's how I see the moat of a lot of these companies. They're very unique in what they do, but catching up to them is actually really difficult. And it's interesting that even when, say, a country like the US is trying to create their own semiconductor supply chain, the companies that are doing that is actually, they're the same Asian companies. It's TSMC who's building the fab. They're getting equipment from a Tokyo Electron. They're getting equipment from a Lasertech. They're getting materials from Ibiden. So the supply chain remains the same regardless where you take it. And the reason for that is it is just so difficult to do that the expertise for that is with only a handful of companies. I'll give you another example within the automation space. There is a company that develops electronic ink. Now, this is a company in Taiwan that has patents and know-how to be unique in doing this. So whether it is your Kindle, or more importantly, whether it is electronic shelf labels. So ESLs, as they are called, they're in grocery stores, and it allows you to actually combat inflation through the rising wages of workers and the lack of workers. You can actually start digitizing the process so you can centrally update the prices of different things on your shelf. What it also allows you to do is make dynamic pricing a reality. So you have a set of bananas that are getting spoiled, you can discount it by 50% so that you can sell it, and you can do this all centrally and electronically, where you don't need manual labor actually going there. Now, again, this company is unique. There's nobody else who's doing it. Walmart has a big rollout today where they're rolling it out across several grocery stores in the United States. And this e-ink is the only company that is actually supplying this electronic paper to Walmart.
Thank you, Yash. So technology really enables productivity and enhances the ability for both workers as well as companies, and they can get more efficient. How do you think about investing in such a dynamic space where maybe disruption is quite a big part and parcel of an industry structure?
That's a great question, because technology is one of the spaces where the value or the prize is so large that a lot of companies want to get that prize, because many tech companies tend to be natural monopolies. And if you are a natural monopoly, then there's a lot of economics you can get out of it. So there are a lot of companies that are competing for that. That is why one of the core principles in how we invest is to look at competition, to look at industry structure. I'll tell you a personal story. I used to work at Microsoft in their Windows Phone division. And I was there when Apple came out with the iPhone, and I could see that Microsoft, or our division, had been disrupted by Apple. And you can see today that no one thinks about Windows Mobile, everyone thinks about iOS. And I think that is illustrative in terms of the prize if you get things right within tech, but it's also illustrative about the amount of value destruction in case you don't get it right. So one of the things we're very focused on is looking at companies which are investing for the future. So we would be investors in companies that are either leading today, or they may not be leading, but what's really important for us is, are they investing to be leaders of tomorrow? And that's where a lot of the small and mid-cap companies that we're investing in, we believe that many of them will be leaders of tomorrow. And that's where we see a lot of opportunity.
So Yash, you manage capital on behalf of clients and you manage an Asia technology strategy. What is this Asia technology strategy that you put together? What's in the portfolio?
Sure. So the way we think about Asia technology is that it is driven by three basic factors. One is the semiconductor supply chain, which we believe Asia is the heart of the semiconductor supply chain. Second is the growth within Asia. And the third is the opportunity in digitization of both the consumer and the enterprise. Now, you put these things together, some of the themes that we are exposed to are automation, they're cloud computing, electrification of the car, IoT, and all of these themes are accelerated by artificial intelligence, which today I think is going to be massive to drive all of these themes further. Our goal is to provide our investors with opportunities that are away from the general set that everyone thinks about. Everyone thinks about the mega caps in the US, but there's a whole set of companies which are high quality, which tend to sometimes get ignored by the market. And we see the quality of these companies actually improving. Their moats are expanding. They have a more and more critical role either within the semiconductor supply chain or within the geographies that they are serving. And our view is that a lot of these companies can give you opportunities that are different from what most investors are already accessing. So we have a team that is local because I think it's essential to have people on the ground. We have analysts who are in Hong Kong and Singapore who are focused just on Asia. I focus solely on Asia as well. But we are enhanced by a global team within Wellington, which is looking at the entire globe of technology companies. So we can leverage the meetings that they're doing. While they're meeting some of the leading companies in the US, we're meeting the leading companies in Asia, and we're connecting the dots to figure out where is technology going in the future. And then we're investing against that. So the goal of the Asia tech approach is to find these under-researched, under-owned, differentiated set of companies that often are small or mid-caps and provide that exposure to clients, because at the end of the day, the mega trends that I'm talking about, these companies are exposed to the same mega trends as the larger ones, except that they give a different set of potential outcomes than what you get with the larger companies.